Discuss this story with a prominent voice in North Carolina Republican politics. Joining us now is the former governor, Pat McCrory. Sir, thank you so much for being with us. I just want to point out to our viewers that you did not endorse Robinson. Former President Donald Trump has, though. You've actually been vocal for years now, warning that unsavory details about Robinson would come to light. I see you smiling. You lamented that those warnings were ignored. Why do you think they were?
I think they were ignored because he was probably one of the most effective, populist, dangerous speakers that I've ever seen on a campaign trail. And he told people what they wanted to hear, not that what they needed to hear, and people responded to him. And therefore, the past chair of the North Carolina Republican Party, Michael Whatley, who's now chair of the National Republican Party, ignored many known flaws that many of us knew about him and just assumed they'd be brushed over. But this has been a ticking time bomb for several years now. And frankly, a lot of the things that have come out during the past year by conservative blogs about his business dealings along with his wife has raised enough issues that would disqualify many people for any elected office, whether you're Republican or Democrat. So it's very disturbing. And but he's been a powerful voice with the base, and no one wanted to challenge him. In fact, from a personal standpoint, he participated in TV ads against me in a U.S. Senate race in favor of Ted Budd, sponsored by the Conservative Club for Growth, which were very, very effective and very convincing. They were not truthful, but this shows the powerful voice that he's had. He's an individual that came out of nowhere to become lieutenant governor based upon a YouTube video, which kind of shows the way politics is going at this point in time. But it was just a matter of time. And this story that has come out at a terrible time for the Republican Party, because now it's too late as of yesterday to replace him on a campaign or election that's starting in weeks regarding early voting.
I wonder if you think he's going to hurt other Republicans on the ballot and whether you would call on him to drop out.
Well, I think he probably should have not even run based upon the record he knew he had and based upon the business record alone of some nonprofits that he and his wife are being investigated on at this point in time. I think what's going to happen is people are deserting him. People that used to beg him to be on the same podium as he are now just going to walk away. And President Trump and his team basically were avoiding him during the last month or two. Some of the videos of him being with him are older videos, but I think they even knew, anyone in the circle here in North Carolina knew that there were a lot of rumors about him about to be broken and let the public know. So he hasn't been transparent. With almost everything that comes out about him, he then admits to them, but only after he's caught. And that's not good for North Carolina. It's not good for the political system, whether you're Republican or Democrat.
Sir, do you think he should step down as lieutenant governor?
Well, I'm in the media now with a PBS show called Unspun, so I reluctantly, but I never endorsed him before I started doing that, because I had strong questions about him. And I think the party ought to make some stronger actions about what he has said in the past and some of these new revelations that have come out. And even some of the strongest supporters of him, like Senator Ted Budd, and I'm glad to see Ted come out and say he needs to prove that these are not factual statements.
Should Donald Trump rescind his endorsement of Robinson?
I don't think he's qualified to be governor, but that was even before these statements were made. And again, he's not the type of politician that I'm looking for. And I don't think the Trump people knew a lot of these factors before he did that. They saw that he was a powerful speaker. But again, a lot of this information wasn't known. And in defense of the Trump campaign, I knew they were trying to walk away from him a while back and not wanting him to be on the stage. So but this should be as no surprise to the party. And with all due respect to Michael Whatley, who's now chairman of the party, of the National Party, when he was North Carolina chairman, they should have done a better vetting job for such an important job. You can get away with this when running for lieutenant governor, where there's very little vetting. But when you run for the governor's office, believe me, people are going to check into your background. Sure. It's a very, very important job. I was honored to serve, and I knew I was vetted, and some of it's bad vetting, but you better be ready. And
sir,
he obviously is not ready.
Quickly, before we go, I want to ask you whether you think this might hurt up ballot, if you think this controversy might hurt Donald Trump's chances of winning the state of North Carolina.
Well, North Carolina is known for close elections, and so anything that divides the party ticket doesn't help the Republican Party. But Republicans in North Carolina also have a reputation of dividing their ticket. I'm an example of that. I lost my reelection by 10,000 votes out of 4.6 million. And that was due to a very small percentage dividing their vote and splitting their ticket. And so it does work to the Democrats' advantage, and probably does work against President Trump, because most of our presidential elections in the past have been, we're a purple state. It's going to be always 1 or 2% at the presidential level and at the gubernatorial level, with a few exceptions, including my first election when I won by 8 or 9%. But when you lose by less than 1%, every vote makes a difference.
Former North Carolina Republican Governor Pat McCrory.